Welcome to the I Saved You, Now Do the Dishes podcast. I'm author and speaker Carrie Severson. In each episode, I'll share stories and tips from my experience with caregiving and advocacy through my husband's cancer journey. Let's get into it. Welcome to I Saved You, Now Do the Dishes podcast. I'm your host, Carrie Severson. Welcome to the first season. In this season, we're going to talk about family caregiving, being married to the person that you're caring for, advocacy, marriage, burnout recovery. Let me start first and foremost introducing you to me and my husband. His name's Gavin. He and I met on Bumble in 2018. Shout out to Bumble. Would love to know how you met your spouse. Our journey coming together wasn't super smooth. He was a divorcee, met me shortly after getting divorced, and it totally freaked him out because I knew pretty much on our second date, he was the guy I was going to marry. I knew it. It was actually St. Patrick's Day, 2018. We went on like a 7-hour date. And by the end of it, I was like, okay, well, that's him. I've been waiting for him. And how we came together is very interesting because I believe strongly God created our paths to intertwine so many times and we just never met. He and I worked across the street from one another for like 5 years and never met. And literally across the street. We lived a mile away from one another at two times in our lives. Once in the late 90s and another time in like the early 2000s. And we were actually at the same hotel in 1992 as kids. I was in 8th grade. He was a senior in high school and we never met. So finally it took this app to bring us together. He has kids from a previous marriage. I do not. And when we got together, blending that, figuring out, our new dynamic was challenging. We are that couple that got married during the zombie apocalypse, an early zombie apocalypse. Our wedding was scheduled for April 19th, 2020. And 32 days before we were supposed to get married, the government shut down everything. So we had to replan our wedding 5 different times. And after like the third time, I just got fed up with living with him. Our living room was a makeshift preschool at that point, teaching the youngest one how to read, bought the oldest one a computer so he could, basically be online. But come to find out, he was like on Discord and YouTube while he was supposed to be on, school. But yeah, at that point I was like, you know what? We're just going to have somebody get ordained on the internet, go out into the middle of nowhere and get hitched. So that's what we did. So if you've never met anybody who got married during early COVID online, I'm your person. We had like 120 people watching us on Zoom, and he and I were surrounded by 8 people. It was pretty cool and yet tragic at the same time. We had to have a vow renewal a year and a half later because the wedding contracts still existed and nobody would let us out. And we couldn't find a place to live for the longest time because we kept getting outbid on every home we put an offer in on. So until finally September 2023, we found this place and this coffee bar. If you're listening and you can't see me, I'm sitting in front of this little nook in my kitchen. And on the back is this black, what is it called? Chalkboard. Yeah, it's a black chalkboard. And the previous owner painted the coffee bar on it. And I fell in love with that and asked specifically for this to stay. But yeah, we moved in September 2023. There's kids all over the place. The kids immediately made friends. And I'm talking like the next weekend we moved in, they're like 10 8-year-olds in my kitchen rummaging through the pantry of the new kid and the new kid on the block. And I'm restocking snacks for the neighborhood. Everyone immediately fit in. It was great. Got plugged into the church right away, started making friends. Gavin had a hard time adjusting. He is a little bit slower to come around to change, where I am able to like jump in, slap on some lipstick, throw my hair in a messy bun, and, take the dog for the walk and make a friend on the way home. So we were a little off in the beginning, like 2 shifts in the night. He was, going to bed and I was getting up. And 6 weeks after moving into this beautiful place, it's a Saturday, and there's a ton of kids in our house. I'm making a huge pot of mac and cheese for the neighborhood. And he walks out of the bedroom with his hand cupped over his neck. And he's like, honey, does this side of my neck look big? Does this make my neck look fat? He asked. And I thought he was like coming up with a prank or something to freak the kids out, or, got bit by something or has a pimple. And so I kind of scoffed at it, and I didn't look up from what I was doing. I'm scooping mac and cheese into bowls. And he's like, no, seriously, Carrie, look at me. And the way his voice hit me made my stomach kind of immediately cringe. Even talking about it now, I get this like sinking feeling in my gut. Your spidey sense, the hair on the back of your neck kind of stands up. So I looked at him, and there was this golf ball size lump on the right side of his neck. I'm like, yeah, this looks weird. And I put down the mac and cheese and I rush around the other side of the counter and I start poking at it. And I'm like, does it hurt? And he says, no. He shakes his head, no. I'm like, well, does it hurt to swallow? He shakes his head, no. So I take to the internet, which is a rookie move. My first tip for any of you going through something weird: don't look online. And the internet said a bunch of horrific things, named cancer as a possibility, and then said to wait 3 days. Gavin was convinced he strained his neck playing with the kids the day before, and it was just a weird muscle. Well, 3 days later, it's still there. It's actually a little bit bigger. And so I'm literally like kicking him out of the house, go to the walk-in clinic, just go talk to a medical professional. He comes back 20 minutes later with like a script to get an ultrasound and recommendation to go see his primary. So he gets in right away to see his primary, literally the next day. They do an ultrasound that afternoon, and we have to wait now for the results. Gratefully, that happened really quickly. 48 hours later, we get the results back that he needs a biopsy, and here's the phone number to call. And that was it. That part was really frustrating. In Arizona, everything is kind of piecemealed. And so it's not like you just walk into a doctor's office and you go 2 doors down to get one test and a different floor to get a different test. And maybe you've got to walk out into the corridor and cross the street or the little pathway into a different building for somebody else. In Arizona, everything is in different parts of the valley. To get a biopsy, he was looking at like 3 weeks later. And that didn't sit well with me at all. And the particular company that he was referred to, there was a bunch of different offices all over the state. And so I asked him to call as many offices as he could to try to find a live person, because we were on, hold for hours. And I took different offices. And so he was calling different people. I was calling different people. And we would wait on hold for hours. We would try a different facility, get put on hold. until finally one afternoon, it was a Friday, I get a live person. Gavin immediately hangs up from the phone call he's on, and I put the phone on the counter, and we both like lean over it like it's a brand new baby, and we're so excited we get to talk to somebody, and I start crying. I introduce myself. I introduce Gavin. We talk about our situation. We have an appointment, but it's not for like 3 weeks. Do you have anything anywhere throughout the entire state of Arizona that we can go to before that? And meanwhile, my work at the time, I am a recovering burnout, and I have worked in the healthcare community providing burnout recovery seminars, conferences, talks for years at that point. I knew firsthand that the woman we were speaking to was most likely burnt out, possibly caregiving fatigue. And so I did everything I could to make sure she felt appreciated. You know, we asked her name, sympathized with the fact that she was probably hearing dozens of stories like ours already that day. I mean, we had to wait 2 hours just to get a live person that particular day. She put us on hold and came back, and she's like, I found something November 8th or November 10th. It was 7 days from that particular day. Great. Thank you so much. We'll take it. Thank you so much. You have no idea how much impact you've made into our lives. We really appreciate you. We poured a lot into this woman. And she started crying. Burnout is real in that industry. I knew it beforehand. I wanted to make sure she felt appreciated. So now we wait again. Got another week for another test. This time, though, it happens to be the day that I'm actually in Washington leading a burnout recovery seminar for a private healthcare company. 500 people are sitting in this conference room, and my husband's in Arizona getting a biopsy. I'm in Washington pouring into 500 strangers that are in burnout. And it was really hard for me to stand up there and give 100% of who I was for these people, knowing that my husband could possibly have cancer. At that point in the journey, he and I decided to call it something. So we landed on Big Fat Boil. And Big Fat Boil had grown, like quadrupled, by the time he had to go in for the biopsy. He used to circle it at night in like a marker that he found. And every morning, the bulge was outside the lines. So what started as this golf ball, by the time he got the biopsy, it had grown from the bottom of his earlobe all the way down to his collarbone. And it was 3 finger lengths wide and the size of my hand. Like I could put the tips of my fingers underneath his earlobe and cup his neck, and it would fit into the palm of my hand. It was really big. I'm doing everything I can to support these healthcare professionals. Burnout recovery is something I talk about a lot. I've written books about it. And I gave them everything I had. In fact, here's a tip for you caregivers. Burnout is real for everybody, entrepreneur, employee, caregiver. Coming out of burnout as a caregiver was actually really hard for me, much harder than it was as an entrepreneur. But my favorite tip, we're going to start out strong, give you my favorite tip of burnout recovery, is cold therapy. You can't always jump in a cold shower or cold plunge in the middle of the day, so you have to improvise. And my favorite things are ice cubes. I have ice rollers. I bought them on Amazon. They're pretty wide. I don't use the small ones that estheticians use on your face, even though you could use that. There's plenty of pretty ones out there. But I just get like, I think it's like $7 or $8 on Amazon. It's pretty wide. It's used for muscles, athletes, if you have leg cramps, calves, it will fill your whole or cover your whole muscle. I stick it in the freezer and I rub it on the side of my neck, both sides, for about 60 seconds in between meetings. And my tip, or my body sign, I guess, is when my body starts to sway back and forth. I know at that point that I've come out of fight or flight, or my parasympathetic nervous system has shut off and my state of relaxation is on, my state of sympathetic nervous system is on. If you're out, take a piece of ice cube, put it in your napkin, and rub it along the side of your neck. So here I am in front of these 500 people, and I have ice cubes being passed around, and everyone's taking them and putting them in napkins and rubbing up and down their neck. And I can't not think of my husband being stabbed, in the neck in a different state, waiting for biopsy results. It was really hard for me to be there. So I get home the next day and he's got 5 puncture marks on his neck. They're purple. And we couldn't do anything but wait. It was really frustrating to sort of be out on our own, waiting for this, other shoe to drop. The possibility of it being cancer was very in our face. Calling it a big fat boil, though, was how we sort of, played it off. We downplayed it. We made fun of it. We, made a joke about it. But it was scary. He was walking around with his, high, a collared shirt as brought up as high as he could. He'd walk around with a jacket with the collar popped. It was scary. We waited 3 weeks for biopsy results. And that whole time, I'm practicing every tip I knew to calm my fight or flight, to stay in the state of relaxation. I made him really nervous by constantly asking, hey, have you heard from the doctor? Have you heard from the doctor? That's a tip I have for caregivers and advocates. It made the situation even harder for him. Finding something I would put my energy into was really important. I should have done something else, but I took care of myself the best I, knew how in that time of my life. I went to Zumba. I went for walks. I wrote. I finished my guided burnout recovery journal. It's actually called the Enoughness Method. I actually finished it in between that time of waiting for his results. So in next week's episode, I'm going to share with you how we found out Gavin has cancer, or had cancer, I should say. And you will not believe the horrific way we found out. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of I Saved You, Now Do the Dishes podcast. If you are a family caregiver, understand that this podcast is for you. I totally know what you're going through. I love you. I see you. I'm here for you. And please remember, it's okay to ask somebody else to do the dishes. See you next time.